you're at a party, people grab instruments and start making music. It's just what you do.
Welcome everyone to Bent Fig Media. I am your host Yashar Shayan, and joining us today is Shaudi Bianca Vahdat, a local Seattle-based Iranian-American artist who will be talking about her work and studies. Hi Shaudi, how are you today?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Great to have you here. Tell us a little bit about what you've been up to over the last couple of years or several years.
Thank you. I am primarily a composer and songwriter and theater artist. As you said, based here in the Seattle area. So growing up, I had a musician father, and so I did a lot of musical performing as a kid with him and started kind of writing my own songs at an early age just for myself, because he was a songwriter as well, my father. And then in middle school, I did my first plays, my first musicals. I was lucky to have a really great um, theater arts teacher, a really dedicated one, um, Mrs. Lambert. And so that's kind of where I fell in love with theater. I was already in love with music at that point. And then I got further into theater in high school. I was again lucky enough to have access to a really great um, education organization called Youth Theater Northwest, which is where I started doing a lot of musicals, some plays, with the brilliant staff there. And then for college, I went to the University of Washington here in Seattle, studied drama, studied music, and this thing started happening where I would be cast in plays with music and there wasn't a composer. And so the director would just ask me to like write something because they knew I was a musician. And so I started for the first time writing plays for writing music for theater. And that's when I discovered how much fun that was and how much fun it was to write for actors to sing. So that's when I started doing that. Got involved with a theater company that I helped to co-found with some of my fellow University of Washington drama folks called The Horse in Motion. That was kind of an experimental theater company. We had a lot of fun. And again, I was doing music directing and composing for those productions and just really enjoying that part of the work, and then performing as well as doing my own songwriting and releasing singles and albums that I self-produced. And then the time kind of came for me to go to grad school. I felt like I wanted to further my education. And I went to Berkeley, their graduate campus in Valencia, Spain, which was a really wonderful, intense 1 year program. One of the best parts about it was getting to go to school with an international student body. So I got to make connections with musicians from all over the world, which was really wonderful. And um, I did a lot of composing as part of that program as well, and a lot of songwriting. And then I was happy to come back to the Seattle area and continue to work here with the theater community as well as the music community.
And I believe you play at least one instrument, right? Tell us what instruments you play.
I do. I always say I'm primarily a vocalist, but I also play the piano and I play the guitar. I call it a composing instrument for me. I very rarely perform on guitar, but I use it to compose. And yeah, those are my instruments. A few other ones here and there.
That's great. And what's your history and your family's history in Seattle? Have your family been in Seattle long?
Yeah, so I actually was born in California and then we moved around a little bit and eventually ended up in the Seattle area in, I think, like 96. Um, my parents were both born in Iran and came to the US. Um, my mom was 14 when she came to the US with her parents, and my dad was a little older in his like I think early 20s when he came to the US after spending some time in the UK first. Um, so yeah, I mean, I've been in the US my entire life, but my family kind of uh, immigrated here. And then when I was a kid, like we had kind of a slow movement of our extended family members to the US as well. So we kind of like gained cousins and extended family as I was growing up, which I just went to one of their one of them just had a baby, and I just got to meet her a couple of weeks ago. And I first met her when her family came from Iran when I was a kid, and she was like, I don't know, 3 years old. So that was pretty amazing. So yeah, that's kind of our history of coming to the area.
Great. Yeah, I've had similar experiences of kind of family trickling over throughout my life, especially when I was younger. I think at this point, I guess those who are going to immigrate already have a lot of them, but um when I was younger, I think it was always exciting. It was like, oh, new family members just dropped, new cousin just dropped, and a lot of them were distant family. But because, of course, as an immigrant community, we're always looking for community, we would just instantly be family in a way that I think be, others might not be so close with second cousins and third cousins and second uncles and aunts. That was something I was enjoyed myself. And how has your identity as an Iranian American and your family's heritage played into the work that you do as an artist?
Like I mentioned, I grew up in a musical household. My father was a musician and a composer. And so I got to grow up hearing a lot of Western music, like a lot of jazz, a lot of musical theater, a good amount of folk, and then also a lot of Iranian music. So my dad had like a setar and a tar and a dombak, and um, we have cousins and relatives who are beautiful traditional Iranian vocalists. And those are different kind of scales than the Western scales. And so it was really a blessing to get to hear that growing up as my ear was developing, because I think as an adult, it just gave me kind of a broader sense of possibility in terms of um, my tools as a composer and the things that I draw from as a composer. I would say I'm mostly as a composer drawing from the Western scale. That's mostly where my ear lives. But I really appreciate and acknowledge that having access to that more traditional Eastern scale helps me so much when I'm writing new music and when I'm thinking about possibilities in terms of melody or harmony. And so that's one very practical way that growing up in a multicultural household um, really directly affected me as a composer. I think I can sometimes make choices um, that are a little bit different. The same way I recognize a lot of my contemporaries do that also grew up in multicultural households. I can often hear that in their work as well, that they may go somewhere a little unexpected. And perhaps a lot of that is having that blessing of growing up with multiple scales and types of music in their ears. I think also though, perhaps the more abstract way it's affected my work is just I think a lot of people who grow up with more than one culture um, have in some ways this ability to practice empathy um, kind of at an early age that, I mean, a lot of people have the ability to practice empathy, but I think it's often kind of an extra incentive to practice empathy at an early age when you're kind of realizing like, oh, my family members and the people that I know, like the way they do things is a little bit different than the way like my neighbors do stuff. Like they have banana pudding cups for snack and they don't know what tahdig is and like they don't kiss each other hello. And so at an early age, you kind of start seeing these differences. And I think best case scenario, it can um, help you develop a more global perspective, perhaps, and an appreciation for the fact that human beings can behave differently, but still be essentially the same at their core, and start to practice empathy at an earlier age. And I think that always affects your work as an artist when you have that type of perspective.
Yeah, an observation I've made of empathy, especially in the last 10 years, where people have been talking about empathy more and more, but it seems a lot of people can only empathize with those who are most similar to themselves, which of course makes sense. We understand those who are most similar to ourselves. So I think what you're saying, in terms of being bicultural, it means you have a broader ability to empathize. You understand different types of people, different behaviors, different foods. So I think that can truly help us broaden how widely we can empathize with other people who are not exactly like us, because that's a pretty narrow range. I think if we can only see and feel how others feel, if they see and if they look and feel like us.
I agree.
Um,
It seems kind of kind of sad, honestly, if you can only do that, and also pretty limiting if you're creating art.
yeah, that makes sense. I have this theory. So from what I've read of concepts like perfect pitch, I know it's hotly debated, but from what I've read of the research, it's suggested that generally perfect pitch can be developed only when a in a young child during a critical period, and in order to develop the ability to hear and reproduce those sounds on demand, they have to be exposed to those sounds at that young age. I forget what it is. It's like 1 or 2 years old. I could be wrong. Maybe 3 years old. Um, and I have this theory that people like Iranians who are, I think, often exposed to a lot more sounds, a lot more music, and impromptu, improvised music of just family members picking up hand drums and doumbaks and whatnot, and drumming away. That I think it's possible that people like Iranians and other similar cultures might have higher instances of developing perfect pitch, but I could be wrong. Do you have perfect pitch by chance? Do you know?
I do not. I have a pretty good ear, but I do not have perfect pitch. And I have not heard this theory, but I think it's really, really interesting.
Yeah. I feel like we need to take people of our parents' generation who really grew up in that. Like when I was young when I left Iran, but I really remember, we'd just go to a family member's house and people would grab instruments and start playing, and they would sing and dance and harmonize and improvise. Like it was so natural to them. If anything, I'm envious. I always thought I would just one day learn how to do it by osmosis just by being around these folks, but I never did. I wish I would have. Oh well.
You know, it's funny you say that because yes, I've experienced that as well. Even though I grew up here, our family was very much like that, especially my mom's side. Like you're at a party, people grab instruments and start making music. It's just what you do. And I also, when I was younger, when I just finished high school, I had the opportunity to spend some time in Zambia. And that was another instance where I was really struck by how naturally music was woven into a culture. When I was in Zambia, their, I believe, president had just passed away. And so, like, one of my first experiences when I got to Zambia was I was like in Lusaka, which is the capital, and it was like this, I think, outdoor mall. And there was just a huge gathering of people, and they were singing a song of mourning for this president who had just passed. And there were some performers who had like rehearsed together and were, kind of performing. But then everyone in the crowd just started singing along, and it was like four-part harmony, you know? And I was really struck by that because at least my experience of a lot of American culture was that singing and making music is not necessarily like a community thing here in the US. It feels like the narrative is a lot more like certain people make music and then some people do not. You only get to make music if you have a certain type of voice. And it's not a participatory thing. And people, I think, in general, feel a lot more like shame or hesitance to participate. I think places like churches, for example, are an exception to that. Those are more community spaces where everyone kind of lifts their voice together, even here in the US. Um, but yeah, in general, that experience of being in another culture that was not my own made me realize like, oh yeah, this does kind of remind me of like when I'm at my family parties. It's like everyone just sings. It's not like only the people with good voices get to sing this song from Sangasar together. Like we all just sing together. It doesn't really matter what your voice sounds like. And um, I try to bring that perspective to my work as well and think about ways I can make music feel a little bit more participatory.
Yeah, and I think when we sing together as a community, those like myself with the untrained voice, we don't sound as bad because you can't hear us as much. We're not the only voice in the crowd, and um, it adds to the harmony maybe and uplifts the music as a whole, but without standing out. And I think I've seen it can be popular to ridicule people for singing off key and not having a trained voice, and especially when you sing individually. I've even been to karaoke events where I feel like half the fun of karaoke is to sing bad, but then I see people get ridiculed for singing really poorly. And I'm like, ah, come on, just let people enjoy it. Singing is, part of singing at least is to have fun and share with each other. But yeah, singing as a community, I think can help alleviate that shame.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. It like every voice adds to the texture of the whole, right? And it's when you're doing that type of singing, exactly. It's like every voice is welcome because it makes our chorus more interesting. And by the way, not to imply that like there aren't excellent, beautifully trained musicians from Iran, from Zambia, from all these places. You can have both at once. Um, but yeah, I love that you said that too. It's such a human thing to express oneself through voice. That's why we have activities like karaoke where people can go and you don't have to be a professionally trained singer. The point is just to have that human expression.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for sure there are very beautiful types of beautiful voices from Iran and I'm sure Zambia and all over the world and in different singing styles. Have you ever explored some of the traditional Iranian singing styles that I think can be different than what we see in the West?
What a great question. I have not. I'm to be vulnerable, a little afraid to. I think it's so beautiful and it's so different from the type of voice that I studied growing up that it frightens me. I also have some cousins who are like kind of masters of the craft of that type of singing. And so I just honestly like, I'd rather just listen to them instead of trying to do it myself. Um, Masa and Marjan Vahdat are two of my cousins on my dad's side, and they're, beautiful artists, and I really admire their work. And that's the type of singing style that they are masters of. So yeah, if anyone's interested in kind of checking out that more traditional Iranian sound, those are two great artists to start with.
Great. I'll have to look them up and explore them and see if I can share them online. Thanks for telling us about your cousins. We all have, I think, cousins to be proud of. I hope that we can revel in their accomplishments and share with other people the cool things they do. I know I do, so that's great.
Oh
I'll
yeah, I so admire them both.
That's great. So I think around last year, perhaps you wrapped up a residency, artist in residency at Inscape. Is that right? Tell us a little bit about what you did with Inscape.
Yes, so when I was at Berkeley in Spain, my thesis project was a show called The Golden Door, an American immigrant song cycle. And for that show, I interviewed different members of the American immigrant community or communities, and then I adapted those interviews into songs. And at Berkeley, I was fortunate to have these incredible musicians around me. And so together, we had a band and a cast of four, and we performed these songs exploring the topic of immigration to the US from many different firsthand perspectives. So each song was kind of a standalone story that either someone had told me or that I had learned about from research or that was informed by my own background, kind of telling one perspective of what it's like to come to the US. So that started at Berkeley, and then the folks at Inscape allowed me to continue working on that project through that residency there. So I conducted more interviews, I wrote more songs, and I was able to do kind of a composer in concert solo version of the new version of this show at Inscape. And what was so meaningful about working on this particular show at that particular location is that Inscape was formerly the the INS building, which was a detention center for immigrants for many years. I wish I had it in front of me right now, but I believe, gosh, it was like from the 1930s until 2004, if I'm not mistaken. This building in Chinatown, International District, which is now known as Inscape, was used to detain people. It was also used as like an administrative building to handle more, um, kind of administrative aspects of immigration. So it's this old building with this incredibly important history. And I I just felt very inspired to work on stories of immigration in that particular building. There's even a song in the show that's just specifically dedicated to the history of that building and the many, many people who live there, who were detained there. Some people even passed away there while in detention. And so it has this very, in some ways tragic and heavy history. And there were also a lot of moments of joy that happened in that building. People got married there, people got their citizenship there. My own mother got her green card in that building actually in the 80s, which is something we discovered when she came to see me at a show there like years ago. She was like, I got my green card here. And so, because like I mentioned, it was also administrative. Um, so I just felt like this very personal connection and also like just a lot of respect for the stories that had happened there. And the Wing Luke Museum, fortunately, did this really big oral history project where they captured a lot of the history of this building. And it's now, all over the walls of the building. When you walk around on the 4 floors, you can see pictures from the history of the building and read some of the stories of the people who were detained there. So my kind of practice while I was there was to walk around, read about the history, just like try to absorb whatever I was feeling and then go back to my little studio space and just write. Um, so yeah, that was Inscape, and it was so great because you actually came to one of those composer in concert performances, which is how we got connected, which is awesome. And it was such a small space that I was able to like really chat with folks after each performance and get a lot of great audience feedback for the next iteration, which is happening now.
Excellent. Yeah, I myself had visited that building with my mother when I was young in the 90s for her naturalization. And
Wow.
other family members of mine who had immigrated went to that building for naturalization and to take their tests to get their citizenships and things like that for those immigration administrative services, as you mentioned. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of immigrants in the Seattle area and in Washington State as a whole. I'm sure many people have been there because I think that was, I don't know if it still is, but I think that was the primary building. So even if you didn't live in Seattle, it was the primary building that serviced much of the state, if not the whole state at some point. I don't know if there are multiple now, but a lot of history
Yeah.
there, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, exactly like you said, so many people's stories in our area in particular, but actually people all over the country now, in some way intersect with that building. And so that's why I'm so grateful that it's being preserved and that the history is being preserved because I think it's so important to so many people's stories, that it would break my heart if it was either demolished or if it became some kind of a you know, like for profit or commercial entity. Right now it houses artists. I don't think I mentioned that. So they have this artist in residency program, but then all the other rooms and spaces are occupied by different types of artists. And I think there are maybe one or two architects as well. And every quarter or maybe like twice a year, they actually do an open house. And so the public can come in and tour the building and see what art is being created there. And yeah, it's a wonderful place to check out to learn more about people's history. And it's so cool to know that you also have been there and you have some history there as well.
Yeah, and I also briefly looked at it. I founded and operated my own online wine store for several years, and when I was looking for space over a decade ago for that, that was a space I looked at. I don't know if it was, I think it was mixed use at the time. I don't know if they still allow non-artists, but yeah, it was, I remember they had affordable space, but because of the way liquor licensing works in Washington State for selling alcohol, I think it wasn't a viable option in the end, but I remember thinking it was a cool space. And again, the person who gave me the tour told me that it was the old INS building. And I remember thinking, oh, I think I've been here. Yeah, confirmed later with family that that was indeed the building. So you mentioned, yeah, and I really enjoyed coming to your performance at Inscape last year. And you mentioned getting some feedback and having the chance to converse with folks after those performances. What kind of reactions and feedback did you receive?
I feel like every time I perform this piece, I get people coming up to me and saying, "That's my story. That song you sang about this, that's me." I felt that. I've thought those things. And it's not surprising because, again, these songs come from real people's stories. And so, it's this beautiful reminder that even though immigrant stories are diverse and no two are identical, there's still a lot of common ground between our stories. And so, yeah, I mean, I had people after the show say like that happened to me. What you saying about I had someone who I believe worked as I think an assistant to an immigration lawyer, or she somehow was involved in immigration law for many years, and she said like that I recognize a lot of those stories from my time working in that field. I had a family member who came and saw the show with her parents who are both immigrants and said that was a really special experience to view that with them and that she felt really moved to tears. And so, yeah, these are the types of things that people shared and that give me the energy and the encouragement to keep sharing these stories. Which again, like I can't emphasize enough, don't come from me. They come from this wider community of of people. And actually, specifically, a lot of the reason behind doing this show is to recognize that there are a lot of false stories about immigrants being spread right now in the US, and that these false stories are causing very real harm. Um, there's false stories about many groups of people being spread right now, and they're all causing harm and damage to varying degrees. And so part of the goal of this show was to help shine a light on real, true stories of who immigrants really are and what they're actually doing here in the US, which is very different from these harmful false narratives that we get. And particularly, a lot of immigrants of color are the targets of these false stories, not exclusively, but often it's immigrants who are coming from countries that are majority people of color. And so that was the goal of this show as well, is to focus on those communities and spotlighting some of their stories.
And when you were in touch with immigrants to collect and explore these stories, did anything stand out for you? Any common threads, any surprises, any unique stories that you didn't expect?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's important to say, um, this type of theater making is called documentary theater making often. And there are some stories of it happening in an exploitative way. And so I think it's just important to say at the outset that uh, my goal was really for it to be a collaboration and for no one to feel exploited. Um, and for the folks sharing their stories to feel ownership. So I'll just start from there that everyone was like very much informed of how their words would be used. Everyone got to choose whether they'd be credited or not, whether they'd be filmed or not, and all these things. Um, so that's kind of where we started from. In terms of common threads or things that surprised me about people's stories, I think, I mean, one common thread was just how convoluted the process is, how um, over the top the waiting times are. Like I said, most of my family came to the US, I would say probably in the 90s, early 2000s. So one thing that surprised me was just how much things have changed since then. It seems like the waiting times for processing have gone up astronomically, especially for the folks from the countries that I spoke with. Um, like 100 years, someone said, to wait for their, I can't remember exactly which phase in the process it was, but I like had to ask him to repeat a couple times because I was sure I'd misunderstood because that doesn't make sense given the average human lifespan. So that was one thing that surprised me was I guess I just hadn't realized that it had gotten that bad, which is probably naive of me. But yeah, I mean, I think one thing that didn't necessarily surprise me, but that I think is important to emphasize is that there are obviously some really tragic stories and some stories of families being separated, which I think is particularly hard to hear about. But so many people also talk to me about how excited they were the first time they came to the US, or how the first time in their lives they started to feel like they belonged was when they came to the US. That, this is where they found their community and their purpose, and where they started to feel like they could live their lives the way they wanted to for the first time. These were things that were good for me to be reminded of because sometimes when you're hearing these stories, it's like, oh my God, why? Like, what is the point? We're we're treating you so poorly and we're subjecting you to so much injustice and in some cases downright cruelty. Why would you want to be here? And so it was humbling and helpful for me to remember and be reminded by these folks' stories that one, it's their right to be here if they want to be, and two, that sometimes their home countries just aren't right for them. Either it's not safe for them or it's just not where they can live their fullest life. It's not where they can be who they want to be and who they deserve to be. It's not where they feel like they can be their full self. So those stories really jumped out at me as well.
Excellent. Yeah. And I agree with everything you said. And I think obviously if we can treat immigrants right and allow them to be themselves in the US, then that's what benefits the US the most as a country. If we bring immigrants in and treat them poorly, then their contributions are going to be less significant, whether it's contributions of income tax, contributions of art, culture, food, if they open up a great restaurant. These are all just, some of the very small ways in which, or one of many ways that immigrants will contribute. And the better their life, the better their contributions to the collective whole of American society in one form or another. So I think it's really important to give everybody an opportunity to be themselves and realize themselves and live a good life.
I really agree. Yeah, I mean, not only is it, a human rights issue, but it's also just like the experience that I have when I conduct these interviews is like, yeah, we want these folks here. Like, this is someone I want as a neighbor. This is someone I want helping to shape the culture of my community. And I hope that when folks come and see the show, they have that same experience of being like, yes, of course, I want this in my community. Of course, I want this perspective and these values brought to my neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we've talked a lot over the last decade or so about how much representation matters and being able to see our stories represented, whether it's in an art project like yours or on television, movies, music, just seeing our stories or stories like our own as immigrants and as diaspora reflected in mainstream culture one way or another that as opposed to just having to hide our culture and only have it be present within our own home and within our own family, I think really matters and has an impact on kids growing up a lot as well. We're seeing a lot. I'm seeing a lot of younger folks on Instagram now, kind of talking about, this is what you do when you're the child of immigrants. This is like people jumping over fire for Charsham Masudi and people who are third culture kids and first generation American born kids, kind of feeling like they can embrace that culture a little more publicly rather than only in the home of their parents or just in the backyard somewhere where no one else is seeing. Being able to be yourself in public is such a powerful thing, and not having to do this code switching and passing and hiding and whatnot, I think can have a profound impact. And we've also seen stories and even research about how mentally and emotionally difficult it is to have to hide who you are. It takes a massive psychological toll, and the processing power on the brain and the nervous system is taxing. So it just again makes it more difficult for you to be a fully functional member of society. It's best for everyone if everyone can be themselves in all the ways that they are, for the most part.
I love that. That's something I've been thinking a lot about as well. I I think I've been able to attend just a few demonstrations and protests here in the Seattle area. And one thing that's really struck me is how people do seem to be recognizing that our causes are not at a cross purpose. They really can any cause that is pro humanity and pro um, anti-oppression and respecting everyone's ability to express themselves and be respected and loved for that really help each other. As you said, if I am able to bring my full self and my full identity as an Iranian American, um, hopefully that allows space and encouragement for other people to express their full identities. Um, I'm seeing a lot of, like, for example, immigrant rights signs, like alongside huge trans pride flags, alongside big Ukraine flags, and like Palestinian flags. And I'm seeing these people all standing next to each other in solidarity and against oppression. And it's so encouraging to see this kind of physical representation of all of our communities recognizing this truth that, we only benefit from supporting each other and protecting each other's rights. Because again, we're all part of the same community. We're all neighbors, and so we all benefit, as you
Absolutely.
really beautifully said.
You mentioned going to protests and things of this nature. Have you had any opportunity to explore art as a form of protest? I'm sure there are visual artists who are expressing themselves. I've seen people express kind of a protest and dissent via dance, and I've even of late with a lot of these protests, I've seen some protest songs, hip hop, and contemporary forms of song, traditional ones as well. Have you had any chance to explore these, or even create yourself?
Oh, I mean, I am kind of the view that almost all art is inherently political to a degree. And that, I tend to like look for the protest in whatever art I'm looking at. So yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes obviously it's more overt and direct, and I think there's definitely a lot of need for that, particularly right now. And sometimes it's a little more covert. So, um, yeah, this feels like a good place to make a little plug, if you don't mind,
Please.
for um, the fact that the City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture just opened up an application for um, for artists. The Office of Arts and Culture just opened up a call for proposals of two types: exhibitions inside Arts at King Street Station, which is this beautiful space at the top of King Street Station. It's gallery space, it's event space, and it's free and open to the public. And it's a wonderful space to hang out. So exhibitions there are being funded, and then also activations and installations at King Street Station Plaza, Union Station Plaza, and other public spaces in the Chinatown International District, Pioneer Square, and Stadium District. So there's funding opportunities for all disciplines of art, and um, there's kind of a unifying theme for this call, which is we still dream a future. We still dream a future, which folks can read more about what that theme entails and what it means. But the reason I thought about it in the context of this particular conversation is that it's the goal is to fund artists to think about how, in these very difficult times for many of us, the act of imagining a future that is empowering and safe and joyful for everyone is in itself an act of protest, an act of purposeful rebellion. And so I'd really encourage artists and community members who are interested to please check this out, to consider applying. The city is offering a lot of resources to help folks apply. So if you've never applied for funding before, please don't let that stop you. There are information sessions. There's information available in any language, including American Sign Language. So if you don't feel comfortable in English, please just ask for an interpreter. They can help you make sure you're putting your application together in the best way possible. So I really hope people take advantage of this funding opportunity. I'm bringing it up because I'm on their advisory team, their advisory board, I think we're officially called, along with a number of incredible artists and community organizers and leaders from around the area. And so part of our job is to help get the word out and make sure people know about this funding opportunity, which closes in early June. So if you're interested, please do take action.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I think it's really important to share with our community, with fellow Iranians and the MENA community and other immigrants and people of color, et cetera, these kinds of opportunities. Because I think historically there have been and still are many barriers for people who have been marginalized to get access to funding, to get access to space, whether it's space for forms of self-expression such as art, or even space, obviously housing, or space to start a business. These have often and still are often harder to get for a lot of folks. So I think sharing this out and letting people know the opportunities and the deadlines and the link where they can engage is really important. So I hope folks will apply for these grants and get them and reach out to us and tell us about it, and then we can help get out the word for whatever projects they engage in as well.
Yes, the deadline is June 3rd at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So
Good to know. And
yes.
you mentioned imagining a future as I forget exactly how you put it, but just now you said something about, yeah, imagining a future as kind of a first step. And also I think maybe you're implying that that is in a way itself a protest, because I think a lot of people right now are imagining a very grim future, and a lot of people are down on the present and the future, and we're engaging in nostalgia about the past and how much things were better. I think people on all sides of the political spectrum are engaging in these forms of nostalgia. So I think imagining a better future has become in itself a form of protest and a form of dissent. And I think it's really important to try as much as we can to have a more positive outlook towards the future and actively work towards it. And in Iranian culture, we have this saying that comes from Zoroastrianism: the good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And I think part of the implication, part of this philosophy is that in order to make a better world, we first have to start with thinking about making a better world. We need good thoughts first. And this is reflected in so many other traditions, like in alchemy. They say alchemy, which of course, is a spin-off or a sect of I think Sufi Islam, if I remember correctly. I might have that incorrect, but they also say as above, so below, which has been largely co-opted by Christianity, and I think a lot of people associate it with Christianity, but that comes from alchemy. And again, the same idea is whatever you hold inside is what you will create outside of yourself. And as the Zoroastrians would say, if you start with good thoughts, then you move into good words, then we start talking about imagining a better future, and then we go into good deeds and we start actually working towards building a better future. And I think we need that. We need that imagination, the positive imagination about the good things our future can hold and the good things we can build together as a community and with other communities.
Yes, certainly. I think artists can play a really important role in society's development. Obviously, we cannot do it by ourselves, but I think we do have a really important role to play in all the ways you just enumerated.
Excellent. So now you mentioned the Golden Door project, the immigrant stories that you've been exploring, and now that is, I believe, culminating into a performance at Seattle Center coming up pretty soon here in June and July, right? Tell us a bit about that.
That's right. It's so exciting. So we just finished casting, which is super exciting. Have a cast of five incredible musical theater performers. Some of them are newer to Seattle. Some of them you've seen at venues like the Fifth Avenue Theater, at Seattle Public Theater. They're a really great, talented group of people, and many of them identify as first or second generation Americans themselves. And that's also, I think, really crucial to the telling of this particular story. So, really excited for everyone to get to see them interpret these songs and interpret this material. We have a free, open to the public performance, which is supported by the Artists at the Center program grant. That's going to be on June 8th, which is a Sunday at 2 p.m. at the Seattle Center Armory. So please come and join us, everyone. Again, it's totally free and open, and we really hope to see you there. Then we have more performances in July at Seattle Open Arts Place, which is the co-producing partner for those performances. It's going to be Friday, July 18th, 7:30 p.m., Saturday, July 19th, 7:30 p.m., and Sunday, July 20th at 2 p.m. And that's a venue in Capitol Hill. The tickets are pay what you can. And I will say seating is pretty limited. So if you're interested in joining us, and I hope you are, please get your tickets soon so you don't miss out. We would really love to see you there.
Great. It sounds like tickets for that will go live soon. We'll try and look for that announcement and reshare it on the Bentfig social media channels and wherever else we can so that folks can seize on this opportunity. Really appreciate that you're doing the pay what you can. I think that is really important to get to get a show to get an inclusive audience and have access for people who might not otherwise be able to have access to the arts, which I think historically has been seen as kind of an elitist upper crust only for the rich and the fancy sort of thing. But I really appreciate that a lot of artists and arts institutions in Seattle and all over are making the arts more accessible in that way. It's so important.
I totally agree. And that is one of the goals, I think, of Seattle Open Arts Place. That's part of their model is making the arts more accessible and inclusive, and that's part of why they do that, pay what you can. And artists at the center, that's part of their goal as well, and that's why they put on this free public art.
That's great. Yeah, I saw the roster on the Seattle Center website for artists at the center that had this, diverse array of folks. Again, representation matters, and to be able to see people who kind of look like yourself and have names, non-Western names that are reflective of your own name, I think can be so important for us to see. I really appreciate that these programs are taking place. It's fantastic.
Me too.
Do you have any plans of what you might do next? Any ideas or anything you're secretly working on that you can share?
My whole heart and whole brain is in the Golden Door right now. So that's where I am completely. I'm giving myself migraines from from putting my whole self into that project because it feels so urgent and so meaningful to me right now. But yeah, that's we'll see what comes next. But right now that has my soul.
Really appreciate the effort and energy that you're putting into this. I hope people will check it out. I think I'm excited to see it, and having seen the preview, I'm excited to see what the full-fledged version looks like coming up soon. I'm thrilled about it. And tell us, where can people find you online and on social media and connect with you? Plug your website and your Instagram and whatever else.
Oh yes, thank you for reminding me to do that. Yeah, so my website is shaudibiancavahdat.com. You can find links to my music there if you'd like to check me out on Spotify or Apple Music or any of those major platforms. I'm at Shaudi Bianca on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Yeah, I think those are all my plugs.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure people will love to connect with you and explore what you've been working on. Is there anything you want to plug outside of your own work? Are there any artists that you found interesting of late, local or otherwise, or any events coming up, performances?
Ooh, yes, there are so many amazing artists that I love and admire in the area. I think I will just say for now, please do check out Seattle Open Arts Place. They're constantly putting on super interesting programming, some of which is very experimental in nature, which is super cool. Please check out Artists at the Center. There are some really incredible artists, some more established, some more emerging. Also, please come to Arts at King Street Station. We'd really love to see you there. It's a rotating roster of artists and events. First Thursdays are, always like um, events happening there. Again, free. I think there's been a lot of like free jazz recently for those first Thursdays. That might shift soon, but the programming is excellent. There's some really amazing artists. And I feel like not enough people know about it. So please know about it. Please come and hang out there. And yeah, those are maybe my plugs for now.
Great. Um, all of that is fantastic. Anything else at all you want to share with us here as we wrap up, Shadi?
I don't think so. Just to say thank you so much for this space to be able to chat about the arts in Seattle. It makes me feel really excited about the future of our artistic community here and our community in general. So thank you for hosting this.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm likewise really excited about what's going on in Seattle in the arts and culture, certainly with the Iranian and MENA community and other communities as well. I think there's a lot to look forward to. I know I am. So thank you so much for joining me in conversation here at Bent Fig Media, Shadi. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much.